Hey, everybody. It's Jeanne Veillette Bowerman from Pipeline Media Group and editor-in-chief of Pipeline Artists. So today we're going to talk about speed pitching, which I'll explain the whole thing to you. This session is supposed to be about an hour, but it's probably going to run over. And I don't care. I've got nowhere to go. I have my Symposium mug. I wish I could say there was wine in it, but there's not, just good old water. So a couple little housekeeping things first. There's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You'll see two dialogue boxes with a big Q&A next to it. If you have a question that you want to ask me, pop it in there. If you just want to talk amongst yourselves, Ruth is over in the chat room, which is, you'll see the chat is more on the left at the bottom of your screen, and that's where you guys can talk amongst yourselves. It's hard for me to present, watch the chat, and watch the Q&A. So I'm going to basically present, and when I catch a question down the Q&A, I will answer it. But I might just wait till the end to answer them all, because once I go through the whole gamut of how a speed pitching event works and how to make the most of it, you might get some of the answers to your questions along the way. And yes, there's going to be a recording that you're going to get at the end of this. And also, since all of our free sessions always live on the symposium.pipelineartist.com site. So you can just hover over sessions and you'll see free, and everything also lives over there too that's free, and on-demand stuff as well. But this is a free one, so that'll be right there on the site too. So and the recordings are usually ready within like 72 hours. So just be patient for those. Okay, so let's just get started. Let me share my screen so you can see the slideshow. And also the slideshow is going to be available to you too. I've got it as a PDF. And so we'll give you a link to that when we send you the recording in the email. So don't worry about frantically taking notes or what did she say or whatever. You're going to get the slideshow as well. So tonight, welcome to Tips for Speed Pitching to Literary Agents. These are also the same tips pretty much that you would get for if you go to a screenwriting pitching event. There used to be a lot of them before that I've attended many, many times, and where I fell in love with pitching. I'm like a pitching junkie. And there's not as many anymore. So unfortunately, because in screenwriting, let me just differentiate for any of the screenwriters out there. In screenwriting, those pitching events, rarely would you ever sell a screenplay. Those were really the whole purpose of those, in my opinion, was to get practice pitching. And that's where I cut my teeth pitching. That's where I got comfortable talking about my scripts and talking about my stories, so that when I had those meetings with HBO or Johnny Depp's offices or Imagine, I was totally comfortable pitching. I already knew how to do it. It didn't freak me out. So that's what I felt the purpose was for the screenwriting ones. But in the novel world, these pitching events are unbelievably successful at helping novelists get agents. So let me go through and get right to it. So why not just query via email? Because now we're kind of in the novel world, and most of the novelists, send out queries. The reason I love in-person events, and I think you should go to them whenever you can, is I'm a big believer in looking somebody in the whites of the eyes, like you get a good feel for them. You can see people on Twitter and go to their website, and you might see this charming little picture of them, but you don't really get a feel for who they are. And it gives you a chance to test that chemistry that you have with an agent or an editor. And it's also more proactive, like you're actually going somewhere to do something for your career. And I like to take action. I'm not somebody who likes to just sit still and wait for something to happen. And when you send off an email query, you're just like, la, 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 and you're just waiting. You get instant feedback in these speed pitches. So I like that. They're either going to pass or they want a submission. So But one of the other things that I love about them is they're usually wrapped around a writers' conference. And I love being around other writers. It's the energy that you get. It's really inspiring. You come home from those events just excited to sit back down and get to the keyboard and get to work. And they're also a great way to network, whether that be with agents or with speakers at the conference, but also with other writers. You know, you developing this team of writers around you that are like family, that you can give each other feedback and all that stuff is super, super helpful. I see the questions are all starting to come in. All right. So I'm going to get to some of those answers. So I'm just going to keep going. So first of all, what is speed pitching? A lot of people have asked me this question. Basically, it's kind of like, I don't know if you ever remember seeing like that episode of Sex and the City when Miranda was speed dating. You know, it's kind of like that. Like you quickly get to know each other and whether it's a fit or not, your fit being good fit for them. So how it works is kind of a little bit frantic. Like you get in these lines for either the agent or the editor that you want to pitch, and somebody is like, okay, go and you sit down at the table and you get 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the event, to talk to them, which means you should keep your pitch down to like 60 to 90 seconds because you want to give some time to talk afterwards because they're going to have questions for you. And then the agent either says, yes, I want to read your partial, or thank you, but I don't think this is a good fit for me. And you're going to see me say many, many times during this presentation, pay attention to their submission instructions because it's super important. You don't want to get so excited when they said send something that you're like, oh, I forgot to ask them where to send it. You know? So just try to just take a deep breath and pay attention. And then what happens is when your time is up, either a bell will go off. I went to one event, the Great American Pitch Fest, where they used to have a cowbell that would ring, and or somebody will announce time is up, move on. And then you just shake their hand and thank them for their time and their interest. And then you get in the next line to the next person you want to pitch. And you just repeat this over and over and over. Great American Pitch Fest, this was like a 7-hour event. So you're pretty much writer roadkill at the end of the day. It was really exhausting. Most of them are, I don't think there's any of them that last that long. You're usually maybe pitching an hour or two. So basically, your goals for this, I mean, you shouldn't go to any event without setting yourself some goals. So you have 2 very simple goals, is that you want to get the agent to want, you know, not just ask, but to really want to read your submission. So the more engaging your pitch is, it's like think of it as like a little trailer that's getting them excited to read the submission and hopefully request the full manuscript. But for right now, you're not worrying about the full manuscript. You're just getting them to ask for the submission. And you want to get the agent excited about representing you, because this is your career, not just this one book that you're pitching. So, you know, how do you achieve those goals? We're going to go over a lot of the ways. But when you pitch your story, you know, you're highlighting those interesting characters, because the character is why people keep turning the page. They have to know what's happening to that character. So you want to make sure that your pitch shows that there's plenty of conflict and that there's some compelling theme, you know, something that speaks to them, and that there's an intriguing hook. The other goal is, you know, the other thing you can do is show how professional you are. A lot of writers are so focused on the craft of writing and the craft of their book and writing their book that they're not always thinking about the business side of it. So when an agent is asking you questions or challenging maybe something that you said, don't get defensive. They could be kind of testing you to see, you know, how you take feedback. But most of them in these pitching situations, there's no test happening. They literally just want your book. So, but they want to, you know, see, and also see the kind of person you are, and if they'd want to work with you for years. So the other thing that most agents I've talked to say is one of the most important things is showing your passion for your book. If you can't explain your passion, they can't translate that passion when they're trying to pitch your book to an editor to get published. So if they see how passionate you are about the book, that gets them excited and it gets them passionate too. Before you even go to these events is when you should start prepping. You shouldn't wait until you get there. Every site and every event has a list of agents and editors who are going to be there. So go and look at that and go to their websites, see who they rep, what genres they rep, get to know what they offer. And also check their social media accounts and your social media account. Because when I look at people's accounts, and they're just like a hot mess, and I'm talking agents and editors. Like if I look up an agent or editor and I see that they're like really dramatic, not many are, I haven't really seen many, but it turns me off. Like I know they want me to be professional and I want them to be professional too. So it goes both ways. They're also going to look at your account and see if you're a hot mess. So you might want to, before you even go to the event, maybe look at your Twitter account, delete some tweets, check yourself before you wreck yourself, as they say. They do check your social media, especially if they're considering, after they've read your submission and they really like your work, now it's like, okay, now what do they like? They want to know if you're going to offend any of your potential readers. But you also might be the kind of writer who's writing material that is intended to fire up and offend people. And so that might actually be a good thing. So just, know what you want to present yourself as a brand, I guess, and look at that. And then make a list of, like, say, the 10 agents that you hope to talk to at the event and put them in some sort of order. You can, as part of your research, you can use querytracker.net and manuscriptwishlist.com. Both of those give you an idea. I think Query Tracker has over 1,700 agents on there that you can go peruse and look through. Obviously, you're never going to go to an event that has 1,700 agents at it, but I think most of them, I know when I went to Great American Pitch Fest, they would have about 100 people to pitch to, but that was managers, agents, producers, the whole gamut. For novel stuff, it's never that many. Writer's Digest has their annual conference the end of this month in New York City. I haven't looked at the list yet of reps, but they usually probably have, I don't know, 30, 40 agents. But go look at that at writersdigest.com. They have a events tab and you can go look there and see who's going to be there. Again, and on Twitter, you could search the hashtag MSWL, that's manuscript wish list. And a lot of times agents will post stuff that they're looking for with that hashtag. And again, look at the submission instructions. So you already know in advance what kind of things they typically ask for when you query them in writing via email, what they would want typically. It's probably what they're going to want in a situation like this. So that way you're just prepared, like they want the first 20 pages, they want the first 50 pages, like you kind of know in your head, okay, this is the range of things that the different agents that I plan on pitching to want. The other reason I say to make a list of 10 agents is that sometimes at the last minute, some of them can't show up. So you want to make sure you have enough on your list that you've researched to be sure that you can reach out to the next in line if that one person can't be there. And also embrace the unexpected. There's so much that happens at these events that you've never planned for. There might be an agent who you never ever thought you would query if you were just going to do your email queries, but then you see them, maybe they're speaking on a panel or something, and you just really click with them and you think, you know what, I think I'm going to reach out to them. So be flexible with that list, because you might also be in the room and see somebody and say, I thought I wanted to query that person, but I don't think I do. So just be flexible about it all. Agent versus editor. So at these events, most of the time, it'll be an agent that you're pitching to, but there are also a handful of editors at these events too. So when you sit down, know whether you're talking to an agent or an editor. But if you can access an editor directly, it's a great opportunity because the agent would pitch an editor. So if you can go right to the editor to pitch them and see if their publishing house would be interested in your work, then you can actually turn that around and say, okay, I just went and pitched Chantel at Agora, and now you go over to Jane, the agent, and say, Jane, Chantel's really interested in my book. I want to pitch it to you because in case she's interested, I'm going to need an agent. And then that kind of like helps you play the game a little bit. So the editor is somebody who works for the publishers and is focused on that one book that you're pitching them, but the agent is somebody who focuses on your overall career. So ultimately, you're probably going to want an agent. But again, you know, if an editor is interested in your pitch, that might help you get an agent. And the actual pitching between an agent versus an editor is exactly the same. You do the same pitch. The difference is that there might be different questions you ask them. Sometimes they'll say to you, like when you're done with your pitch, they'll say, do you have any questions for me? And so then like if you're talking to an agent, you can ask them like, is there anything that's maybe not on your site that you're looking for that you haven't posted yet? Or, you know, what kind of publishers do you see this going to? And with editors, you talk to them about, you know, what kind of marketing their publishing house does. And will this be in print or just an ebook? Or, you know, what's your distribution like? So use the opportunity to ask them questions. So the big day is here, okay? It's a big room. And there's usually in some sort of a ballroom or meeting room. There's lots of tables, lots of people, lots of nervous energy. So you have to just breathe. And there's going to be lines everywhere in front of each person. And everyone is going to look lost and terrified. So what you have to do is try to get out of that headspace of collecting all this nervous energy of the writers around you and just focus on the job at hand of what you're there to do, which is to get an agent to say, yes, I would like you to submit a partial. They are there to find a great book and a great client. So always remember that, like they want to say yes. They're not sitting there waiting to just rain on your parade. So let's get to the nitty gritty. So in a pitch breakdown, so I don't know how many of our attendees have pitched before, and unfortunately I can't see you or see anybody raising hands. So basically there's a great book by Michael Haig called, I think it's a 60-second pitch or something like that. But basically in a situation like that, that's for screenwriting, but pitching is pitching. You know, you're still pitching a story. So very helpful for novelists too. Basically what it is a verbal query letter. You're going to remind, you know, your name. So you want to make sure you introduce yourself when you start. A lot of people forget to do that. They just launch right in, and you want the title, the word count, and the genre. And you want those right out of the gate, because that's something that impresses an agent and lets them know right away. They know what they're doing. And you don't have a lot of time. So you want to orient the listener as quickly as possible. So if they know that you're pitching a horror, they're mentally prepared for that's the story, or a comedy, they're prepared for that, instead of not having any idea what genre they're listening to in a pitch, then being surprised when a zombie comes out of the woods, you know? And then a little tagline of your book, which is, you know, also what we call in screenwriting a log line. Keep it tight and focused. We'll talk about this in a bit. Comparable titles is something that I've heard a lot of agents say varying things on. Some are like, absolutely, I want the comps. I want to know what book out there this is like, but in terms of tone and voice, and others are like, I don't really care. I just want to know what your book is about. So if you're going to give comp titles, and certainly if somebody, you should have them, because if you think to yourself, oh, I'm not going to give them, but they might ask you. So know what your comp titles are. It should be a successful book, not a self-published book, not something that they don't know anything about. Not your best friend's book that never got picked up. And also something that is 5 years or less in terms of age and being out there, and be realistic. Don't say, my book is going to be as wildly popular as Gone with the Wind, you know, or the Bible, you know, so, or J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter, you know, just be realistic and just focus on that kind of tone and voice and feel of the book, and use that as your comp. And then you're going to give like a mini synopsis, which is basically that paragraph of your query letter where you expand upon the tagline and you tell a little bit more about the story. So you're giving a short description, including the wounds of your protagonist and your antagonist. And those characters you can call by name. But if it's a supporting character, refer to them not by their name, but by their relationship to the protagonist. So say your book is about Mary and Mary's boyfriend is named Bill. Don't use the name Bill, just say, and Mary's boyfriend, did this or whatever. Like, so make it so that they can all understand around the main character, because they're listening to a ton of pitches every 5 to 10 minutes. There's listening to a new pitch. And everything gets kind of jumbled and their minds get exhausted. So you have to keep this as simple as possible so they can understand it. Talk about the main actions, the plots and the characters' goals and the emotional impact. Like every story has that outer journey, and like in Rocky, he wants to win the championship, but his inner journey is like, trying to get over the fact that he thinks he's a loser. So you've got to talk about those elements so that they can understand the conflict that's going to happen and the drama that's going to happen and the tension that's going to happen. And certainly, people always ask me too, like, should I tell the ending of the story? Yeah, like especially if they ask for the ending, tell the ending. But then the last thing, after you get done with your mini synopsis, just like in a query letter, the last thing you talk about is you. Like what makes you an expert and about this? Like, maybe like beyond a writer and all of that, I'm also an antique dealer. So maybe I wrote a horror story that takes place in the antique shop of some possessed doll, like Conjuring. But the fact that I'm an antique dealer shows that I've got some experience in this world. So mention that, but also like, if you want a gold medal, mention that, because these are all mentioned and things that have nothing to do with writing, but they're just really interesting about you, because those are things that can make it fun for them to get you press and speaking engagements and all of that. Oops, apologies. So this teaser pitch in Logline, I want to give you some example. And this is an example Chantal Emi-Azman, who I've mentioned before, and I talked about when we presented a discussion like this. You give the genre, then 2 to 3 lines giving the basic idea, and it primes the listener, like I said before, for that expanded pitch. Think of it like, when you're watching TV or you're streaming and you press the info button to see what it says, like what the show is about, to kind of say, oh, that sounds interesting. Like, it's just to get their interest. So after a cyclone transports a lonely Kansas farm girl to a magical land, she sets out on a dangerous journey to find a wizard with the power to send her home. Wizard of Oz, right? You can already see in that little log line, and I've seen 10,000 different log lines for Wizard of Oz. Like if you Google it, you'll see a million different really fun log lines for it, to be honest. And it shows that there's a lot of potential for conflict and twists and turns and danger and excitement. So, and that's really what you want. You want people to, it's like, if I'm going to read this, I'm going to want to keep turning the page. There's I'm not going to dive super deep into log lines because we're going to have a session on log lines in the future, but Lane Schefter Bishop, who I did a Symposium one-on-one conversation with, that was free, that's up on the site, that you should go listen to because it was amazing. They called her the book whisperer. She picks up books before they're even published to produce into and develop into TV or film. So that's a great thing to watch if you're an author looking for some sort of adaptation or film rights sales of your book. She wrote a book called Sell Your Story in a Single Sentence, Advice from the Front Lines of Hollywood. And it's excellent. It's all about log lines. And I promise you, it will really help you master that. So your expanded pitch, this is that section, that I talked about. That's like that paragraph section of your query letter. There's lots of different ways to do this mini synopsis. And there's one example, and it's just one example. There's lots of other ways you can do it. But some people say in the synopsis, make sure you have like 3 segments that relate to Act 1 and 6 segments that that address Act 2 and 3 segments that address Act 3. So this is Christopher Lockhart, who's an agent in Hollywood. This was, I didn't write out the whole thing, but I started, our farm girl Dorothy dreams of going over the rainbow. Through a freak cyclone, she and her farmhouse are transported into Munchkin Land. There she learns the only way back to Kansas is to meet the Wizard of Oz, who has the power to get her home. So she sets off on this dangerous journey. And along the way, she meets a scarecrow, a tin woodsman, and a lion, and they travel with her. However, Dorothy has made an enemy out of the Wicked Witch, and she and her 3 friends, blah, blah, blah. So I'm reading this to you as an example, but you do not want to read your pitch to an agent. You want it to be this organic conversational discussion. But the whole goal of the mini synopsis is you want to show the hero, their goal, the conflicts, the risks, the pivotal elements, turning points, and the end. So Jane Friedman has some pitching advice for nonfiction. There's usually less nonfiction agents at a pitching event just because these events tend to be very fiction heavy, especially in the content that they're teaching at conferences, but there are always nonfiction agents there. So if you are a nonfiction writer, these events are also for you. You should make sure in your pitch you're answering the following 3 questions. So what? What is the relevance of your topic and why is it important? And especially if it's timely, like if it's something that is really relevant today. There's so many things going on in the world today. There's probably a zillion nonfiction topics that are timely right now. Also, who cares? Not to sound harsh, but who is this book going to help? Whose problems will it solve? And there has to be an answer to that question because if it's not going to solve anybody's problems or help anybody, nobody's going to buy it. And who are you? Why are you the authority to write about this? And what's your credibility in your platform? And platform is something you hear a lot about. It doesn't mean that you have to have 50,000 Twitter followers for a platform. It just means that you have to have some sort of authority to be the author of that book and why somebody would believe what you have to say when it comes to that topic. More tips, because we have a lot of tips. When you're at these events, you are selling you, not just your writing. So don't be a freak. Think about the kind of person you want to work with, but you're also there to look at the agent, look at the editor, and say, is this the person I want to work with? It goes both ways. The whole point of this is so that you guys become a team at the end, and that's hopefully the goal. So if you don't appear passionate about your work and excited, nobody else is going to be. And it's this business relationship that you're starting. And like I said before, the more passionate you are about the work, the more excited they get about the work, and the more passionate they can explain it to somebody else to try to sell it, because they're going to have to then pitch it themselves. Dress appropriately, not in costume. So say you're writing a sci-fi and there's a lot of aliens, please don't come dressed like an alien. Refer back to don't be a freak. They don't know what to do with you like that. Like if you're going to go to book signings and they, have a radio interview, they want to know that you can conduct yourself in a professional way. When I say dress appropriately, in the screenwriting world, when I would pitch at these events, jeans, t-shirts, flip-flops. I mean, super casual. I'm pitching people wearing, Batman t-shirts. I mean, super casual. Even when I was at HBO, everybody's casual. So maybe if I was going to HBO's offices, I would put on like a shirt like this, maybe with like a button-down shirt, but I was always in jeans. In novel writing in that world, in New York City, people are usually a little bit more dressed up, but I'm truth be told, I'm still a jeans girl. Like it's hard to get me out of them. So, but I would put on a nicer top, that kind of stuff. But you do not need to be in a suit and tie. That's almost like over the top because they're not going to be sitting there in a suit and tie, for the most part. And be respectful, appear open to their ideas and suggestions, because when they ask you a question, it's sort of like what it's going to be like when they're asking you questions about your book if they were working with you. So you want to be sure that they know that they can have a dialogue with you without you getting defensive, and, you know, be flexible. Like if somebody might throw out an idea to you. Have you ever thought maybe your character could do this, or maybe your character's job should be this? Oh, that's really interesting. I'll keep that in mind. You know, even if you think it's the dumbest thing in the world, that line, oh, that's really interesting, I'll keep that in mind, works great, you know, for Hollywood and for literary agents. And remember, the person that you're pitching to has a ton of experience in this industry, way more experience that you have. So if time permits and you get a chance to ask them some questions, even if they pass, don't ask them questions about, well, why didn't you like my book and what's wrong with my book? Don't go there, because you don't want to make them feel like they have to defend their decision, but ask them something completely unrelated. You know, like, how did you get into this business? Like, this is really, you know, anything, just find out about anything you can. You've got time, you've got those 6 minutes or whatever it is, use them to learn and educate yourself. And they also may ask you, like, say they really like you, you guys really clicked and hit it off, but maybe they don't like that book, or maybe they have a book that's so similar to that they just picked up that's not even up on their website yet because it's still under development, but they're like, oh, wow, I like their instincts because I picked up a book like this. So, and then they might say, well, do you have anything else? Like, what are you working on next? So, like, let's stay in touch. So always have an answer to that question. What else have you got? So when I was referring before about like not reading your pitch, you want to practice it, but you don't want to sound so rehearsed that it sounds unnatural and robotic, because you could tell just when I was reading that pitch, kind of lulls you to sleep a little bit, you know? So try to just have it be really organic. Comedy pitches should be funny. You want to make them laugh, because if you're pitching them a comedy and you do not get a chuckle out of them, you're dead. Thriller pitches should have some sort of suspense. So think about your genre when you're thinking about how you're pitching it, and watch them while you're pitching. If they start like glazing over and, you know, looking at their watch, you know, you've lost them. So, you know, get their attention back, switch it up a little bit, change your tone, do something to get to get their attention back. And the conversation, the other reason why not memorizing them is important is if you've memorized it and somebody interrupts you, it's really hard to find your place again. But if you're having a conversation, it's a lot easier to pick back up and to pivot and recover when you fumble. Now, the other thing too is if you provide verbal milestones for them, it helps orient the listener. So if you're talking about the midpoint, or talking about you know, the final scene or the climax, or, you know, that helps orient them in the story. So that's always a little helpful tip there. And try to avoid overselling. Oh, I've got the best book. My mother really loves it. You know, that kind of stuff. And be accurate in your comparisons, and don't go off into these side plots. And all the characters' backstory, that's not necessary. You want to just get them interested to say yes. And as soon as they say yes, please send it to me, shut up. Like, just stop talking, except to say, how would you like me to send it to? What email? Is there something specific you want in the subject line? And I'll go through that too, but don't blow it. Like, if they've said yes, thank you very much. So what agents want to hear? This is one of Chantel's tips. And if you're out there, Chantel, listening, thank you. Like, imagine when you're sitting there, okay, you've got, I don't know how many writers waiting to talk to you. And it can be overwhelming and tiring and exhausting. So what they want to hear is like, so pretend you read your own book last night and you stayed up really late reading it because it was so good, you just couldn't put it down. And you're looking a little tired or whatnot, and you're going to breakfast with your best friend the next morning, and they're like, why are you so tired? And then you explain, oh my God, I read this really great book last night. And, you know, oh, really? What was it about? And then, oh, this, and this. That's the way they want you to explain it to them. The way you would explain it to your friend over breakfast about a book that you just read. It's really that simple. It's not, you know, absent adding the word count, the genre, and all that stuff. But they just want you to explain it like you're explaining it to your best friend. and, give them that info up front, the word count, the genre, whatever. That lets them know, again, you're professional, but also gives them an idea right away. Is the word count 800,000 words? Well, then they know you don't really know what you're doing. Like, nobody writes a book that long. And passion. The thing that most agents have told me that they really like is passion and writing voice. And the writing voice is tough when you're pitching because you're just verbally pitching. But if there's some way that you can get that writing voice into your pitch, that's really helpful. Little tricky, but it's possible. Like, we have a person on staff at Pipeline, Erica Davis. And if you're out there, Erica, hello. I can guarantee you, her writing voice would come across in her pitch. Just the way she is, just the way she talks, just the way she delivers. So think about how you can do that. And, I know you're nervous, but you can become this engaging person even though you're nervous. Like, you just start talking. The agents know you're nervous. They're not trying to shoot you down. They want to find a good book. So they are going to do all they can to help you take a deep breath and just talk to them like you're talking to your friend over breakfast. They love books and they want to love your book. So just believe that. Now, this is another question people often ask about, if you've self-published and now you want to try the traditional publishing route, what do you do? Like, is there a place for you at these pitching events? Most agents are not going to take something that's been previously published, but it doesn't mean, so just because they don't want to rep the book that you already published, doesn't mean they don't want to rep the book, your next book. So just because you have self-published isn't the death of you as a writer to ever being traditionally published. Rami Mundi, who's written articles for us on Pipeline Artists, started off as a self-published writer, and she's now a traditionally published writer. So it absolutely can happen. In your About Me, when you're doing the whole pitching thing, only mention that you've self-published. If you, typically in this space, they want to know, like, 10,000 copies being sold as a self-published author is good. So mention it. If you sold over 10,000 copies, then mention it. But if you haven't, it doesn't matter that you mention it. But if you didn't do well, but you still say, I want to tell them that I've self-published, be humble about it and say, hey, marketing didn't go so great. I didn't sell a lot of books, but I learned a hell of a lot about the marketing side and business side of this industry by doing that. A lot of agents, a big one that I can think of that I was listening to recently, said they love working with self-published authors who've now turned to traditional publishing because they get it. They understand the importance of a book cover. They understand the marketing of it. They understand speaking engagements. They understand all of that because they've had to do it on their own for a long time. If you've self-published the first book in a series and are looking to have the rest of the series traditionally published, that's probably going to depend on the sales of the first book. Once you put that book out in the self-published arena, it's really hard to pull it back and for the publisher to say, how can I dress this up differently to do something different with it than what they've already done? And that's the challenge because they might have to rebrand it completely. And that's a lot more work and a lot more challenging than just starting with a new story fresh. So if you've self-published before but want to seek traditional publishing, you can absolutely do it. All right, the other things you can do, the do's. Treat pitching like a job interview. If you're going to go interview for a job at any company, General Dynamics, Amazon, Apple, you're going to research the company. You're going to research the person you're interviewing with. You're going to do all of that when you do this. It's important to know that you're pitching the right people. You don't want to be pitching your horror to a company that just sells romance. So you have to do your research because it's going to hone down. You're going to be more accurately pitching the people you should be pitching, as opposed to wasting that time. If you only get 1 hour in the pitch room, you don't want to waste a minute of it. I always write out a bullet list of my pitch to practice, the things I want to hit, so that just like I'm doing here, like I've got all these things written out. Sometimes I'm reading a line, but mostly I'm talking. So it just kind of reminds me of what I'm doing, so that when I'm standing in line waiting for my turn, I'm looking at my card. I don't spend the whole time standing in line looking at my card. I talk to other writers. Like if I'm in line and there's 3 people in front of me, I know it's probably 15 minutes before I get there. So I'm looking at this next line because that's an agent I want to talk to. And I see a writer coming right off of there. I'll stop them and say, how was it? How did you like them? Did they ask any questions that threw you off? Writers, you need to share information with each other to help each other. This is not a competition. It's a community. There's plenty of opportunity for everybody's book to get published. So help each other. And honestly, if you just ate lunch, check your teeth for spinach, because there's nothing worse than talking to somebody and having bad breath or food in your teeth. So make sure you do all those common sense things. And again, show emotion, relatability, passion. They really want that. Firm handshakes. Now, time of COVID, some people still are not comfortable giving a handshake. So my normal advice is grip that hand firmly and don't give a wimpy handshake. I certainly do not want a wimpy handshake from somebody. I think if I shook an agent's hand and it was wimpy, I probably would just not send them my submission. I like a firm handshake, but with COVID, respect that they may not want to shake your hand. So that's a little tricky thing right now, but be respectful of it. If an agent is interested, ask them how you do the submissions, how you follow up, what you want on the subject line. Do you want the material attached to the email, or would you like it copied and pasted into the body of the email? Those are really important because a lot of agents and editors have filters on their emails. So to ding something if it has an attachment, to just automatically send it into spam. So you want to just be clear of what those instructions are. And if they're not interested, just thank them for their time and move on. If you don't have time to ask a follow-up question, just move on. And so then the next person can get to that agent sooner and maybe get a little bit of more time, because then that is respectful to the person behind you. Keep the business cards in a safe place. A lot of people end up losing the cards. There's apps that you can take a picture of the card and it reads it and automatically puts it into your contacts. So there's lots of different ways now that you can hang onto cards. I also keep a baggie with me, and I'll put the cards that I get in that, and I will write on the outside of the baggie what the event was. And almost every conference gives you a lanyard with your name tag. I keep my own cards in the lanyard, in the back of the lanyard. I stuff a stack of them in there so that I can very easily hand my card to somebody. Business card management is a thing. And take notes right after. So you can do it on your phone, you can do it with a notepad, but take notes so that you remember what this one wanted an attachment, this one wanted in the body, this one wanted this and that. So and also to take notes about the things an agent might have said to you who passed, because those might be some things you want to think about in your next rewrite of the work, or the next person you go and pitch. Maybe something wasn't translated well to that agent. They didn't quite understand what you were saying. And so you want to make sure you're clear when you pitch the next person. And if there was an agent you didn't get to because of the time constraints, now that you've seen them in the room, make sure you at least see them so that you can get those spidey senses of them. And then you can always do an email query of them after. So don't panic. And the don'ts. If you haven't finished your book, don't pretend like you did. Typically, I would recommend to people not to pitch unless they finish their book, because they don't want to wait a long time for a manuscript or a submission. But don't pretend that you did. So tell them it's not done. Maybe you're going to this pitching event because you want to test your idea. Maybe your book is it even written yet? And you tell them that right up front. I've written, a couple of novels before. My next novel, kind of want to test out the idea, and here's what I'm thinking I'm going to write about. Nobody would be upset with that at all to hear that. Don't lie, not just about finishing the book, but about anything that you're pitching. They will check your credentials. If you say that you're an astronaut, and that's why you're the person to write this book, they're going to look it up and see, oh, they're not an astronaut, they're a ditch digger or whatever. So don't lie. Although being a ditch digger, I think, would be kind of a cool thing, cool job to pitch if you're a writer, but I mean, only if you really are a ditch digger. Okay, off topic. They're also going to check your social media too. Remember the freak rule. This is a practical rule. Don't guzzle a whole bunch of water before you walk in the arena. Most events are like an hour, maybe 2 hours long. That's a long time to have to go to the bathroom. So you don't want to be, uncomfortable when you're pitching. You want to be really comfortable. Just take little sips of water. I see a lot of people guzzle the water down because they're nervous and they're afraid their mouth is going to get dry or whatever. It's fine. Little sips. Don't pitch 2 agents from the same agency who are in that room. So you can pitch one, pick which one you want to pitch. Okay. So say that agent says, yeah, I want to send me the partial. I want it. And that agent really liked your writing, but ended up passing. And there was another agent in that agency. Then it's perfectly appropriate to say to that agent, is there somebody else maybe in your agency who you think might be interested in this? Because I really like your agency and I would love to be able to work with somebody there. And if they recommend another agent, they will then pass it on to them. And that's going to be a lot more of an open door for you. But you don't want the 2 agents to feel like they're competing against each other for your work. Like if they both liked you. No need to bring your manuscript with you. Nobody wants to, schlep a whole bunch of papers. Everybody does everything on email right now. And probably forever. If an agent is uninterested, don't try to convince them. Just be gracious, accept the no, thank them for their time. And if somebody in front of you goes over the time, don't make a fuss, like be patient. There was a Writers Digest conference, I think it was maybe 2019. There was somebody in the pitch line, and this particular agent wanted to have longer conversations with people. So she was holding people probably in 2 slots instead of 1 slot. So that her line was going really slowly. And there was a woman who was really, really huffing and puffing and impatient. I did hear agents saying, I don't care how great her book is. I don't think I would want to work with somebody who was that disrespectful to the writer who was having this opportunity to talk to this agent who clearly was interested in their work. So just be patient, and they are watching, they've got eyes. There are agents who are going to have nobody in their line. And that's the other thing. If there's nobody in a line, and pop over, like quickly look them up on your phone and pop over. At the very least, you're practicing your pitch with them. And you never know. There's, and Chantel, again, I think somebody did that to her I'm not sure which year, it might've been that same year, 2019. And she ended up repping her and not repping her, she's an editor, but she ended up acquiring her book. And that book is out there. And I think that writer's had a couple books now. But that was back to the expect the unexpected. You never know what's going to happen. Ideally, you're going to want to send your materials as soon as possible, while they're still fresh in their mind and they're excited to read it. You might be that one pitch that they're like, okay, I listened to all these pitches. I asked for maybe 20 of them, but this one is the one I really want to read. So you don't want to wait too long to get it to them. But on the other side, edit your work. Like if you've got enough time, and this goes back to like preparing in advance. Okay. So when I talked about the things that you should do before you go to those events, you look at their submission guidelines. They typically want 50 pages. So before you even go to the event, hire an editor, get those 50 pages looked at, get them tweaked so there's not typos or anything like that, so that when you get the request, you are already ready to send a professional looking sample out. But having said that, you don't need to go crazy and overwork your manuscripts, because the editors are going to want to do some of that development with you. They might have some idea for you and for your story that you say, oh, I actually did that like in the second draft, but I took it out, So, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be compelling enough so they see the potential of your work. Psych yourself up. This is hard for a lot of people to do. This, we tend to be loner kind of people who want to be, just in our caves, but it's easy to sit there and believe in yourself when you're putting the words on the page, but then when you have to actually show it to somebody, it can be a little daunting. So work on that, like, whether you're doing meditation or whatever it is, affirmations or whatever you have to do to get yourself in that place where you believe in yourself and you can talk about your work confidently. And if something went wrong in one pitch, it doesn't mean that you blew the whole day. Like, just pivot. Pivoting is really, really important. And see if you can switch it up and for the next person to conquer that hurdle that you came across. And always remember that you could have the most incredible concept out there, but you need that they have to be passionate about it. And if they're not passionate about it, that's not the person you want representing you. Having the wrong agent is worse than having none at all. So just because it didn't hit it with this one doesn't mean it's not going to strike every bell with the next one, because you also can't take it personally because you have no idea what's going on in their life. So say you have a rom-com and you're pitching agent and the agent's husband just left her the night before. She's probably not feeling very romantic today. So what I'm saying is you don't know what's going on in their lives. So you can't take it personally. You also don't know, like I said before, they could have picked up a book that's just way too similar. And that also says to you, if they say that to you, you should be hearing not, no, I can't take you because I found somebody better. No, I can't take you because I found that somebody's doing something like that just happened to get to me first, but you are on the right track because that is a great idea. That's the kind of idea agents want. So, don't take things personally. And, if say you go through the whole event and nobody requests your work, that doesn't mean you failed. Like it doesn't mean that you should quit and give up and not be a writer. It means that failure for the day, and it's going to feel like failure. I always say to my kids, I literally have learned nothing from the things I've done right. I've learned every life lesson from when I fell, when I tripped, when I stumbled over myself, and when I messed up. When I first started pitching, it was pathetic. So the guy was like, the person in front of me, he loved. So I was all excited to go talk to him. It was the first time I ever pitched in my life. When I started talking, I didn't prepare. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to pitch. I'm just blah, blah, blahing. He couldn't have looked more bored. I was mortified. But I said to myself, I'm never doing that again. I will never go to these pitching events unprepared again. And I never did. So you're going to learn from anytime you fumble, you learn. So you're going to bring business cards. You're going to bring, some kind of way to have a bullet list of your pitch, either it's index card or on your phone. I like having a card because I don't want to always be like this and look like I'm always on my phone. I find that annoying because I just don't want people to think I'm sitting there texting, during the pitch slam, that I'm not paying attention and present, So I always write it down old school style, and bring a little water bottle because your mouth will get dry. And again, don't bring the manuscript. And it's not over when you think it's over because there's a lot of work to do after the event. You're going to prepare those requested materials per their requirements. So if they want your book attached in the email, it's going to be in a PDF. And find out if they want the name on the header and the page numbers, all that kind of stuff. You have one shot at a first impression. At the very least, make sure it's formatted properly. And I'm going to talk in a second about a solid submission email. That's the next slide. Follow anybody you pitch to on Twitter, because a lot of times they'll say, okay, I'm already done going through my slush pile from X conference. So then, like in my next bullet, I say, be prepared for no response at all. So if they say that on Twitter and you have not heard from them, that's your response. You know that they're done and you're not going to get a response. But trust me when I tell you, if they love it, you will know. I mean, people saying this to me all the time in screenwriting, me getting frustrated because I would pitch and I would go to meetings and have generals and then regular pitch meetings. And then one day I gave my script to somebody and I was like, yeah, whatever, here's another person, take it. And it was a very big producer. And I don't even think it took an hour, my phone rang. So when they love it, you will know it. Send follow-up emails to the agents and to the writers you meet. A lot of times people forget about keeping contact with all the writers. I've got friends going back to 2007 that I've met at conferences, and build that network on social media, follow everybody on social. So here's your like perfect email. You're going to do the subject line like after post event, however they wanted it. Okay, so it's typically that these materials are requested. So you want to let them know that the title of the book, the name of the conference, maybe your name, and the body of the email. This is sort of like a little mini query letter. Doesn't have to be as big. You just want to remind them of what you talked about, what this is, what this book is. So they'll be like, oh, okay, this is the one I wanted to talk to. So it was a pleasure meeting you at X pitching event last Saturday, and I'm delighted you're interested in my novel, and insert the title. If there was something personal that happened, like jog the memory. Like I remember pitching somebody who had a Jodi Picoult book on the desk. Oh, I'm a big fan of Jodi Picoult too. Remember we talked about that, whatever. Second paragraph, those basic things: word count, genre, comp titles, then your mini synopsis, and then your little about me. And then in closing, attached or in the body of the email, however it is they wanted, is whatever it was you requested. And I'm happy to forward you the full manuscript for review. And thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Just, professional. And okay, so now let's say you got an offer. Somebody wants the full manuscript. They've read it. And now they want to, sign you. Hold on, Bessie. Have a conversation with you, because this is a marriage. Don't just leap. Because again, refer back to when I said having the wrong agent is worse than having no agent at all. Don't just marry the first one who asks. The first one who asks may be the perfect one. And that's great. Trust your senses, trust your gut. But also feel like you can ask some questions. Like, I'm just wondering, like, how often do you communicate with your clients? And, because some people might say, well, I prefer to just maybe have a monthly check-in, or other people are like, oh yeah, here's my cell number, text me whenever you want. You want to make sure that whatever they want, that kind of communication they want to have with their clients, is also the kind of communication you want. And trust your gut. And it's okay to wait for a better fit. Like, I know you may feel like a pit in your stomach, but it is okay. If you do not feel like this is the right person, do not do it. Just trust your gut. There's lots of other agents out there you can query. And remember, be proud and have fun, because these events are so much fun. I'm going to be at Writers Digest Conference the end of July. And with Matt and Peter from Book Pipeline. And I'm actually going to be in the Pitch Slam room, trying to help authors get their confidence. I'll be listening to pitches in the hallway, all that kind of stuff, because I love the energy of pitching. I love watching people reach for their dreams. This is an absolute passion of mine. So if you are at the event, definitely say hi to me. And now let's hop into the questions, of which there are many. Would you speed pitch an agent who you've already queried a year and heard back nothing? If it's the same book, I probably wouldn't. I would use the event to find somebody else. But if I had extra time, I might go back and say, hey, I just wanted to introduce myself. I queried you last year. I didn't hear anything. Sure, it was a pass, but I just wanted to say hi and thank you for taking the time to look at my work. Because they might say, oh, oh, what was that? What was that book about? Like, you know, and they might want to hear it and maybe open that door again, especially with somebody you really liked. Is it true that agents usually only look for one-off type of books, not a pitch for a series? They don't mind a series, but they want to know that that first book can stand on its own, just in case it doesn't take off. Like, so say there isn't a demand for a second book. So they want that, they don't want that book, that first book ending on a cliffhanger or something like that. It should be able to be a standalone book on its own. And then if it does really well, great. It has sequel potential. Let's get rid of that. Oops, I think I hit the wrong thing. Apologies. Suggestions for writers' conferences, any particular standout events? There's a lot of conferences. I'm sort of stuck on Writer's Digest because it's in my head right now because I'm going in a few weeks. But if you Google, Ruth, I know Ruth has been to a bunch of conferences. If you Google and you look for conferences that are like, so you can find conferences for children's books and conferences for thrillers, like Thriller Fest in New York City. Like, look for things that are your genre. And then there's the broad ones like Writer's Digest, but there's also ones that specialize. There's also other conferences that are really intimate and small and lovely, where they're almost like little retreats. So we'll try to find you when we do this whole recording and follow-up email. Maybe, Ruth, if you could help me remember and write down a note that maybe we'll try to find like a list somewhere that's published somewhere of different conferences, and we can just include that link so you can see different ones. Is a memoir a good pitch for a possible series? Probably not. Memoirs are also very hard sells. Most people think they have a fascinating life, but they really don't. And no offense to anybody writing memoirs, it's probably the most popular thing to write. So, and probably the most popular first book to write. And when you do a memoir, think about it like Eat, Pray, Love. Like, she didn't write about her whole life. She wrote about this specific section of her life. So they are a tough sell, because it's also because what else do you write next? Because you're probably, you did the memoir, you did the most exciting part of your life. And maybe you've got one of those crazy lives that you have compartmentalized a whole bunch of lives within one life. And so then I could see maybe series potential, but I would say if you were pitching a memoir, you could say that if you think you've got lots of different segments in your life, but memoirs just on their own are hard sells. I know nobody likes to hear that, but it's the truth. And that's what we do at Pipeline. We tell you the truth. You know? Do we still shake hands in COVID? I did address that. A lot of people don't. I think I've shook the hands of maybe 2 people in the last month, and it felt weird to do it for the first time. So that's just a personal comfort level. And also read the body language. Like, don't force the person to shake you. Like, try to force the person to shake your hand if they're not comfortable. And if you author a book series, do you pitch the debut novel only, the ebook series, big picture, or the cause, humanity coping with climate change, ending in human extinction on Earth? If you're, again, book series, the first book has to be able to stand on its own. And especially if it's your debut novel and you've never been published before. So I would just pitch it as an individual book, not as a series. And obviously, if you're not pitching it as a series, you're not pitching a big picture thing. So pitch that book, whatever fits that book. Obviously, humanity coping with climate change, ending in human extinction, all of that should be addressed somewhere in the first book. So those are more the themes of it. So definitely include that. But you could pitch it as a standalone book with series potential, is typically how most of my friends who are agents are saying they prefer to know that there's some potential there, but that it can stand on its own. I've had 3 literary agents contact me regarding my first published book to represent me. Not sure what to think about that one. The book has great reviews on Amazon, and now my publisher is republishing it. She's my publisher only because my former publisher merged with the current one. Would this be a good time to get it to a literary agent? It's part of a 5-novel series in the works. Apologies for the long story here. No apologies necessary, Anthea. I would absolutely talk to an agent. If you want to be represented by an agent, the agent might be able to get you a better deal with this publisher, maybe better, better percentage, but, better royalties, better, upfront. I would definitely talk to an agent. If you want to be repped, you're thinking about your whole career, not just the series. So especially if these agents have already proactively contacted you, I would definitely be setting up phone calls to talk to each one of them so that you can get a feel for all of them. Don't jump on and be like, oh yeah, I want you, just talk to all 3 of them first and see which one is the best fit. But because an agent can get you a better deal. So I would do that. Are agents at a speed pitching event actually looking for new writers to represent, or is the experience more about the feedback? For literary agents in the novel space, they absolutely are looking for new writers. In the screenwriting space, you're usually getting like an assistant to an assistant, like it's not the same. And they're there like on a weekend and getting paid pennies, like the ones for screenwriting. The agents, this is how they make their money. The literary agents, they make their money by finding great writers who they work well with, they can sell their books and they get a cut. They don't make anything unless your book is sold. So, and selling. So this is speed pitching events. Absolutely. There's a lot of success stories from them. I'll give you an example. Tiffany Jackson, author, New York Times bestselling author. She was discovered at a Writer's Digest conference. I can't remember which year it was, but then the very next year when she was a debut author, I was working for WD at the time and I was teaching their Pitch Perfect session and Tiffany was teaching it with me. And Tiffany was excited. She was back at the conference the very next year after having gotten repped and published. And she was now on the debut author panel and teaching the pitching with me. And now she is the closing keynote speaker as a New York Times bestselling author at the event in a few weeks. So these speed pitching events really do work. Jim asked, if you have 2 novels already published, will they not be interested? If the 2 novels are already published, whether that's self-published or published with a publisher, there's no need for an agent to pick it up because it's already out there. They can't redress it up, like it's already out there. So if you've self-published, and I know these questions, I could see the timestamp, this was asked earlier, so I might not have gotten to that self-published slide. And I'm not sure, Jim, if this is a self-published books you're talking about, but if they're already published, move on and pitch something that you haven't published yet. Should you give them a business card and should you make special business cards with your book on it? Do whatever you want to do with how you design your business cards. If you think a picture of the book would cover how you envision the book cover to be, but just know if they pick it up and they sell it to an editor and a publishing house, the book cover is going to change. They're going to want to have their own designer work on it. You should, but a lot of people put their pictures on their business cards thinking that might be helpful for people to remember them. You can give them a business card, but I would only leave a business card behind if they asked for it, because if they didn't want your work, they don't want your business card. If they asked for submission, then I would leave a business card and say, okay, great, I took down the information, here's my card. So now you have my information. And then, because God forbid you lost their info, right? That's what I would do. And you need business cards because you're going to hand them out to all the other writers too, and you're going to make friends. Though it's nonfiction or memoirs sought generally at these events. Memoirs are like, if you go to these events and you ask people, how many of you are writing a memoir, a lot of hands will go up. A lot of people are writing memoirs. There are certainly people listening to pitches for memoirs. No question, they exist. They're out there, especially if you have a really compelling story. Anything is pitchable. Fiction, memoirs, nonfiction. It's all pitchable. Is it fine to have cue card during the pitch? You could certainly have, like, sit on the table, your little index cards with your bullet points. No one's going to ding you if you have to, like, look down. They know that you're nervous. They know that you're frankly terrified. So it's okay to have something. Just don't sit there and just sit in front of them and just read. Like, you're also trying to make eye contact and connect with them on some level, but it's fine to have a little cue card, little cheat sheet. What sort of royalty percentage could a first-time author expect from a publisher? Could it be negotiated for a second novel? Your agent is going to negotiate all of that stuff. I've got friends who've gotten advances of anything from $4,000 to $500,000. I mean, like, it depends on the author, their experience. It depends on whether it's a small publisher. The agent is the reason you want to have an agent is because they are going to negotiate all of that stuff with the publishing house. And so it's important to have somebody do that for you. If you write in a special genre and are pitching at a convention built around that genre, how do you effectively stand out? By just being an awesome pitcher. Like, it's how you stand out with anything. Any writing conference, even if you're at a conference where there's all different kinds of genre, you're sitting and you're going to be pitching somebody for a specific genre. There's going to be agents that specialize in one or three or, certain number of genres. I mean, it's just about knowing your story and relaying your story well and having your story come across as really interesting and compelling, and also the same thing for you and your personality. I know that's not really specific, but it's the truth. Can we wear masks during the pitch? Does it depend on the agent? I think it also depends on the venue. You're talking about COVID masks, not like a Batman mask. It depends on the event. Like, I think a lot of places now are moving away from and making it just, your personal preference. If your personal preference is to wear a mask, then do that, because you have to be true to yourself and and do that. If you're sitting across from the agent and the agent has a mask on, you could sit down and, have one with you and ask them, would you like me to put it on? Like, then that shows that you're being respectful of them. These are strange times, and some people are, if they're really, really concerned, they'll probably have an N95 mask on, so that then they're not so worried about you putting one on. And that information, by the way, came from a friend of mine who's a nurse. So, but I do not pretend to be a doctor, so don't hold me on that. So that's just a personal preference thing. But if I were going to pitch an agent and they were wearing a mask, I would ask them if they wanted me to put the mask on, and, just to be respectful. If an agent isn't interested, is it fair to ask if they might have suggestions of other agents who might be a good fit for your work? Absolutely. A lot of times at these pitching events, one of the reasons agents like going to them is because they're a lot of times they're friends with other agents and they get to see them, or they get to meet new agents and editors, because maybe there's an editor that they've always wanted to work with, and there they are sitting at the next table. Oh, great, I'm going to go meet them. And now that expands their publishing network. So a lot of times they will say, you know what, this one isn't a good fit for me, but I know that such and such agent over at table number 7 is looking for that kind of stuff. You should go talk to her. So you can definitely ask that. What is the best app for managing business cards? I had one and I don't remember what it's called because I was terrible at using it. I'm so old school. I literally stick them in a baggie. But I'm sure you go to the App Store, you can find them and look at the ratings and reviews. And if somebody knows of an app, feel free to shove that in the chat box and let Tony know. If my manuscript has been requested by other agents, should I mention that in person and inquiries? Sure, you can mention it. It lets them know that other people in the industry think it's good, you know, that enough to request. You can certainly do that. Hiring editors, is this necessary before submitting to an agent? What if you can't afford one? It's absolutely not necessary. You can find maybe a beta reader. And that's the other reason why I think it's so important to go to these conferences and talk to other writers, because you become each other's beta readers. And that doesn't cost you anything except for time. So just do that. Have somebody look over your work, give it a once over. Money is a definite issue, and some editors are really expensive and some aren't, but you know, but yeah, you can totally have a beta reader, look it over. Is there a list of all these live pitching events? I live in the boonies, so travel must be a consideration. I live in the boonies too, Jim. There are, I'm sure if you Google writers conferences and whatnot. Also, if you're on Twitter, put out a tweet asking for like, what are your favorite writing conferences? And I actually might do that as soon as we get off this session. If you follow me on Twitter, I'm at Jeanne VB, Jeanne, V as in Victor, B as in boy. And I will tweet that out about what pitching events and, you know, what conferences that have pitching events do you guys like? And then you can just follow that thread and see what people say. I'm always curious. For a researched memoir, is a proposal okay, or should you have not just the 50 pages, but also the entire edited manuscript? For most memoirs, this is the one thing that's nonfiction that kind of doesn't follow the nonfiction book proposal rule, which is anything you're writing with nonfiction, you don't write the whole book, you write the proposal and then you get paid to write the book. With a memoir, typically you would write the whole memoir, unless there's some, you know, extenuating circumstances, but typically you would write the whole thing. If you authored a highly unsuccessful book years ago in another genre, should you bring it up? Nope, don't even mention it. No need to talk about that dud. Does a business card need to have a phone number, or is an email and URL enough? An email and URL are enough. People, I think, are really comfortable with, in a lot of ways, more comfortable with emailing, because also to think about your own phone habits. I know when I get a phone call and it's coming from an unknown number, somebody I don't recognize, I don't answer, because it's, you know, oh, I should stop sharing my screen. I usually don't answer because I don't know who it is, and I'm assuming it's just a spam call. So email is fine. Do you bring a copy of a completed query letter? I don't. You certainly could, but I would only leave it behind if it was somebody who requested it, and like if somebody requested the partial and I was like, oh, great, I'm going to send it to you. And here, I actually have the query letter. I'm just going to leave this with you in the meantime, but I'll get everything else to you. But if they said no, I would not leave it behind. Sorry, another about business cards, no problem. I have a pseudonym, but should my cards have my real name? I think your card should have whatever name you're pitching under. And it doesn't matter to the agent until it comes time to sign a contract. Then you're going to have to sign the contract under your legal name. But your business cards can say whatever, like if you're there as, you know, whatever, you know, Sue Jones, and that's your pen name, then your business cards could certainly have that, because that's the name you're going to use as your author. But when it comes to your contract or your agent agreement, you're going to have to use your legal name, but it doesn't matter in your business cards. Can you repeat what we should have with us while waiting in the pitch room? Just, you know, something to write some stuff down, glass of water, maybe a, you know, bottle of water, maybe just like and you'll get the slideshow presentation, and maybe just, you know, an index card with your bullet list of your pitch points, because then you can just kind of practice in your head. Will we be asked questions like why we're writing this book or who our target audience will be? Possibly. It depends on what the book subject is, why they might ask you why you're writing it. Like if it's just a fiction story, probably nobody's going to ask you why you're writing this piece of fiction. If it's nonfiction, they probably will ask you why. I self-published a book 10 years ago, but have rewritten it because the topic is very timely right now. Would it be okay to pitch this book? I mean, maybe, I don't know what the sales were 10 years ago. If the sales were great, then sure. If the sales were not great, you could always spin that as the timing wasn't right, but the timing's right now. And if you're rewriting it differently enough, that would make it sense to have it republished, but still it falls into it's already been published. So it's a tricky one, and not knowing the actual book and how different it's going to be and how you're going to make it different, it's difficult to answer that question. But that's something like, say you went at a pitching event and you decided to pitch this, this situation, explain it, and see. But if you're going to pay the money to go to a pitching event, and this is the only thing you have to pitch, I would wait to go to a pitching event till you have something else to pitch, and maybe do some email queries with that to find it, to gauge the interest. Just because it can be expensive traveling and getting a hotel and all of that kind of stuff. And, but I'm also the kind of person who's, it's always worth asking. Can we Google writers' conferences with agents speed pitching? Does that work? You can Google writers' conferences, literary agents, pitching. I don't know that speed pitches is a term that they would necessarily use. Pitching event, writers' conferences, pitching events, something like that would probably work. Try different variations. And Jim was clarifying that they were all self-published, not marketed at all. But they were still published. And so it's a little tricky. I would go, if you're pitching a new book, you could certainly mention it and say they weren't marketed at all. So they didn't sell very well, but I learned a lot from that process. And it might be one of those circumstances that they might consider that, but I would also go with something new. Would you bring your computer? I pretty much bring my computer everywhere. I don't bring it into a pitching room. I just have it in my backpack. You don't want anything in between you and them. You don't need visuals. You don't need a pitch deck like you do in screenwriting. You don't need any of that stuff. They want to talk to you. They want to connect with you. I'm going to be at Multiverse in October, and we'll be pitching to Tor, not an agent. Is there anything different I should do? No, you're going to pitch to a publisher the same way you would pitch to an agent. You're going to give them all those same points. They want to know all the same things that the agent wants to know. And good luck. Break a leg. Is having a presence on social media, for credibility to your competition. Okay. I have a big presence on Twitter. I think Twitter is a great writing community. I think it helps for them to know you're social media savvy, that you have a presence, you're comfortable talking to people. Again, it gives them also a window into you to go look and see like what kind of person you are. I mean, think about when you hear, okay, not that you guys are criminals, but think about when you hear about a crime that happens. First thing they talk about in the news, and we checked out the social media platform of this person, and oh my gosh, just like the police check out social media, agents and editors are going to check it out too. So if you're going to have a social media presence, kind of decide what your brand's going to be. Like and a lot of people like people who are helpful, people who promote other writers, people who are supportive of other writers, just be mindful of what that brand is what your brand is going to be and what you're going to put out there. Personally, I have a rule about social media that I don't tweet anything that I wouldn't be comfortable seeing on the front page of the newspaper. It's a rule my dad taught me, not about Twitter. He didn't use Twitter, but just in life. Like, and so that's kind of my rule. I don't get all political. I don't have arguments with people. I just don't. Like, I certainly see lots of things. Do I want to say a lot of stuff? Sure, but I don't. Because there's also too, half the world feels differently than I feel. But don't I want 100% of the world possibly reading my work? Yes. So I don't want to turn a reader off or an agent off or a producer off because I'm a hot mess on social, or I say something that they vehemently don't believe in. And I like to keep that stuff over here in a little box. I have a manager, but not an agent. Is that line blurring enough that I should not seek an agent? Sandra, I'm assuming that since you said you have a manager, you're in the screenwriting space. In the screenwriting space, you're good with a manager and a good attorney. A manager is really what you should seek first. And then, but you can certainly get an agent because they can negotiate contracts and do some things that managers can't. But oftentimes managers have agents that they really enjoy working with, and your manager, if again, screenwriting, they will often have an agent that they can refer you to. Angela said she logged in late. No apologies necessary. There is going to be a recording of this, Angela, so don't worry. When submitting a manuscript to a manager, agent, publisher, what is to be expected for rewrites? They'll, it just depends on what they find in the work that they want. I mean, like, it's, you know, I'm not sure what you mean by what should be expected in the rewrites. It's going to be roll up your sleeves and get at it. And taking feedback is probably a whole other symposium session that we're going to have someday, like how to handle feedback. We certainly have lots of articles about that on Pipeline Artists. But rewrites are all about opening your ears, listening, trying. Even if you don't think it's going to work, give it a shot. If they give you a suggestion of what they want to see, try it. And you might just try this one scene that they said they thought would be great, and then they see it and say, eh. I mean, I once did an entire page 1 rewrite for some big names in Hollywood, let's just say that, and got through the whole rewrite. I spent, I think, 2 months doing it. And then, but per their suggestion, I did what they asked. And then they said, I think let's just go back to the structure the way we had it before. But because I did the rewrite, we switched up the structure to be like more like a social network structure, like a trial. But because I did that rewrite, new things came out in the story and with the characters that were like, okay, let's go back to the way it was before, the structure before, but let's take this with us. So whenever you rewrite and you try something, even when it's not something you thought you'd want to do, oftentimes something great comes out of it and you learn from it. So always have an open mind. For a screenplay pitch, is it proper to share what tweaks could be made to the script? For example, girl could die from ectopic pregnancy or taking plan B. Either way, her murder is still the mystery, but her cause of death could be controversial due to the recent Roe Wade. I mean, you could certainly give examples of alternate endings, something else that could happen. I mean, a story, especially in screenwriting, a story is never over until it's over. Even after the movie's made, the editor and shot, the editor still rewrites it again. You know, I mean, if it's, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that, but they want to know that the script you're presenting them is as done as you think it should be and is ready to be seen, not that it's still in development in your head. You know, those are certainly conversations you could have with a manager after you're repped by them and you've got this script and they said, okay, let's create the script. And then you could say, well, do you think it might be easier to sell this if I did this or this or this to it? Oh, you're welcome, Maria. Jim asked, is it ridiculous to retitle a book you had Vanity published and try to sell it to an agent as a manuscript? If nobody knows that book existed, Maybe you could do it. It would depend on why I mean, really taking a good hard look at why you think it didn't sell. You know, if you could sit there and honestly say it didn't sell because I pretty much didn't market it at all, then maybe no one's, but they might, you know, I always still go back to the, will they find it? Like if they Google your name, will they find that you already did this book already? And because they're going to Google your name, and then that could be the problem and goes to the, don't lie. I know it's not really a lie, but that's the problem. If it's out there and it's been on Amazon or been somewhere, and they could, if they Googled you, they would find it. That would be the problem. If you don't have a fitting fiction comp title, is it okay to use a movie? Absolutely. A lot of agents watch movies, and they're fans of those as well. And a lot of movies are adapted from books, so totally okay. During a pitch, is it proper to share the script is based off a published novel? I have the rights to novel. Yes, if you're pitching a script that is adapted from a published novel that you own the rights to, absolutely let them know. And especially if the book was successful or the author is a New York Times best-selling author, then definitely lead with that. Should you pitch 2 different books at one event? Absolutely. You can pitch as many different books as you want. If there's really lovely agents that you are interested in repping your entire career, let them know you've got a couple books ready to go. What is normal price to pay for a pitching event, and are these the best ways to be discovered? The prices they range. It depends on the events. I haven't looked into a lot of the prices. I know when Great American Pitch Fest was on, I think it was $250 for the conference, where they had like Saturday was free, the free classes. And then I think later on they started charging $50 or $25 for Saturday. And then the pitching event itself was $250, but that one, the pitching event was 7 hours long. So you got a lot of pitches in. But I don't really know that there's a norm for pitching events. I have not researched that. What was the pitching book you mentioned at the beginning? Michael Haig. I think it's called The 60-Second, Selling Your Book in 60 Seconds. I think it's what it's called. I think that's what it's called. We're selling your story in 60 seconds. I'm going to, I'll find that and we'll link to it. So I got to remember these things. For pitching a screenplay, can you pitch with an outline, or is a pitch deck better? If you're pitching in person, you're going to want to just talk about it, like, you know, just like anything else. If you're, I wouldn't pitch with an outline. I would pitch like I was writing a query letter, but sometimes they ask for a pitch deck. If they ask for a pitch deck, then send them a pitch deck. We have by the way, we have a pitch deck session that we did for Symposium. Maya did it for us, and it's really great. And she's going to be doing other pitch deck events for us. So if you, and even some workshops where we're workshopping a couple people's pitch decks that we choose. So watch for those. And again, that's a screenplay thing, not a novel thing. When in the pitch should you name your social media platforms that you're on? I don't know that you even have to name them. I mean, you're focused right now on getting them to fall in love with your story. So get them to fall in love with your story and ask to read the first 50 pages. Just focus on that in the pitch. The social media platforms and all that stuff will come later in your conversations with them if they're interested in repping you. Is it best to pitch one project at a time? If you have several projects, should you mention this? Sometimes with screenwriting, people get weird when you've got like 20 scripts and you're still not repped yet. They start thinking, what's wrong? Like there's something wrong. So I would just pitch a couple and make sure they're your best. That's my answer. You're welcome, Sandra. Can't an agent sell your book to a TV or screen producer? Or if you have a written TV series, can't your agent also sell that? There are film rights that go along with your book, and those are negotiated. The agent negotiates those with the publisher. And then oftentimes the publisher has their own film rights division, and that's the person who's going to be selling the rights to your book. So there's a lot of different rights. You've got foreign rights, and you have all this. That's why having an agent is super helpful when you're dealing with a publisher. And I think, I don't know, down the pike, oh, Jeff Willis, we have, who's going to talk about, he's in the screenwriting space, he works for Marvel, and he's going to be doing an upcoming symposium, I think in August, about contracts. So if you're a screenwriter, you're definitely going to want to check that out. When you pitch an event, how soon will you know if they're interested? Basically, it takes a few weeks. And no news is not necessarily good news in this circumstance. So if you don't hear from them, it's usually a pass. But it's okay if after like 3-4 weeks, you haven't heard back from them, to just say, hey, reply to the email that you sent them so that it's all in the thread, and just say, hey, I was just wanted to check in with you to see if there's anything else you need from me, whatever. I would not ping them to say, hey, I just want to let you know, I did a rewrite of this, so I don't know if you want to read this instead. I wouldn't do that, because it says that you didn't think your work you submitted something to me that you didn't really think was ready. And so I personally wouldn't do that. Joanna asks, using the X meets X. Yeah, you can use that as an example, like as a comp. In regards to Jim Flaherty's question, if you have a book you have published, can you sell it for movie rights? And if you have the screenplay for it, isn't that better? Book rights and all that stuff is a whole other conversation than speed pitching. So I really don't want to go down that rabbit hole. You can certainly publish a book that you have, sell a book, the film rights to a book that you've already published, and have the screenplay written. Part of why I'm a huge advocate that screenwriters adapt their screenplays, their spec screenplays into novels, because if the novel then gets picked up, you already have the script. And that helps the production company, because they know the author of the novel, if they want, to buy those film rights, is already cool with, here's the first draft, and they're already cool with the first draft of that script. And they do want the authors to be happy. So that's always, I'm a big fan of screenwriters adapting their scripts into novels. If pitching fiction, is it advisable to share that your goal is also to have it adapted for the screen or series? That's fine. I think that goal is probably the goal of most authors. I think most authors would love to see their books become movies or TV shows. So it wouldn't come as a surprise to any agent. If you have self-published and not mentioned this to the agent, will they hold that against you when they Google your name if you're only seeking representation for your unpublished manuscript? No, they won't hold it against you, because you're not trying to sell them the book you already self-published. You're trying to sell them something completely different. When pitching, how long, and they'll know why you didn't mention it. They can look up and see what sales are. They have that kind of, software to look that up. So they'll be like, oh yeah, I could see why she didn't tell me. When pitching, how long can I talk about my project? If I can summarize in 8 minutes, is that too long? Yes, that's way too long. It's not too long if you're in a formal pitch meeting. Angela, I know by your questions, you're a screenwriter. So like if you're in a formal pitch meeting at a production company, you're probably going to get 20 minutes to a half an hour with them. So you can certainly talk for 8 minutes. If you're in a speed pitching, you really don't want to talk for more than 90 seconds. So hone that thing down. Been creating a pitch deck for my short stories and memoir. Which do you think make a better series to pitch? I don't have any agents I can recommend. I'm just, I don't know your work. So I wouldn't be able to do that. But use querytracker.net and manuscript wish list, and you can really find ones that are looking for the kind of work that you've got. I don't think you need a pitch deck for short stories and a memoir, but might set, I wouldn't attach it to an email query. And I certainly wouldn't bring a laptop into a live event to just sit there and have them watch your laptop. They want to talk to you. And I'm not sure which would be a better series to pitch, because I'm not familiar with the series. I'm sorry. I can't be more specific on that. Do agents always ask for the first 50 pages, or can it be any 50 pages in the manuscript? You know, that's a good question. And I was talking to somebody about that recently. My gut feeling is you want to give them the first 50 pages, because you want them, you don't want to give them the table of contents or the chapter listings or something like that. You want to just give them the first 50 pages. They want to know that they have to keep turning the page. You want to help them ground themselves in the story. If you're giving them 50 pages just in the middle of the book, they're not going to know where they are, and it's not going to give them a real representation of, did you pull me in? You know? So I would only give the first 50 pages, not something smack out of the middle. You're welcome, Joanna. The simple truth is I've never pitched, and the idea scares the crap out of me. Oh, believe me, I'm right there with you. I do not like public speaking, and I define public speaking as speaking. How do I practice? Friends, write it out. I start out by writing it all out. And I don't even like practicing in front of friends, to be honest with you. I don't. I practice in front of a mirror. One thing you can do with Zoom is you can have a Zoom meeting with yourself, and you can record it and then listen back. You know, so sometimes when okay, we do those little trailers. I'm going to tell you a little behind the scenes. We do those little trailers for our on-demand things. Ruth and I create these little 60-second trailers to tell you what's the on-demand session is. So I record mine on Zoom, and sometimes I'll flub and I'll mess up, and I'll just be like, cut. And then I'll just take a deep breath, and then I'll start over. And I just keep doing that until I get the trailer that I like. So do the same thing when you're practicing pitching. Like if you're too uncomfortable to even pitch in front of a friend, record yourself in your own private Zoom meeting. And then you can see, and then you also might realize, you know, hey, that's pretty good. I did okay. I think that's probably the best way to get comfortable. Angela asks, and you're going to do great. It just takes practice. It's like the first time you do it, it's like ripping off a Band-Aid. And then it's like, oh my God, I did it. And then you realize how fun it is. Like, I never thought that I would be a pitching junkie, that I would love it as much as I love it. Like, I love it. It's really fun to be able to share this thing that you've worked so hard on with everybody. We're almost done with the questions. I'm sorry that we've gone way over an hour. Is it better to be independent when pitching and not have a manager or angels just yet? Or is it better to have representation? Or should I rely on a manager and agent to pitch for me and to publisher houses and producers? No, you need an agent. You're pitching to get an agent. So you are pitching independently at these pitching events because you want to get represented. And then the agent will go to pitch editors who work for publishing houses. And then the editor will interview the author and see if they're a good fit and get passionate about the work. And then the editor has to go pitch their own publishing house to convince them to take this and bid on this work. So you really need an agent. If you want to be traditionally published, you need a literary agent. Do writers ever submit random chapters to the story's vibe, or is it the first 50? We already addressed this. I would do the first 50. And when I say the first 50, I know Peter Dunn. Is this the Peter Dunn I know? when I say the first 50, this is just an example. But you got to ask them what they want. Like if it's 50 pages they want, or how many pages they want. Is 50 pages single space, space and a half, double space? They're usually double space times Roman numeral in times Roman in 12 point. That can't be Peter Time. Anyway, that'd be too small of a world. Jim, you're sensational. Oh, you're very sweet, Jim. If you could earn enough as a tenured professor, I'd go back to college just to sit in your classes. I feel like I've had an adrenaline shot. Thanks so much, Jeannie. You made 90 seconds and pitched into a fascinating, two fascinating hours. Thank you, Jim. I actually would love to teach in another lifetime. I have too many things I like to do, so I'm in trouble. Noreen, are you in a haunted location? Oh, you know where I am right now? I'm renovating an old 1780s house. So I'm quite confident this thing is haunted, but I actually have better internet at the 1780s house than I have in my 20-year-old house. So that's why I'm down here. I'm quite confident haunted. My memoir has been professionally reviewed, reader's favorite, and Book Life Prize. Will this be good to advise? Yes, absolutely. And oh, it is my Peter. Hi, Peter. How many words in the first 50 pages? I don't know. There's I don't know how many words. I can't remember how many words are on a page double spaced. You can Google it and that'll let you know. And I think we're going to wrap up because it's late and I think we're good. But I think I got everybody's questions, and thank you so much. And I'm so glad that you guys got all this information. And if any of you are going to Writer's Digest conference at the end of July, we have a special surprise for you that in the recording email that is coming up. But I'm just looking at the chat. I'm going to stop looking at the chat. I'm going to save the chat so I can go back and read it later. But thank you everybody for coming. And we've got a lot of really good symposiums coming up in July. I just want to let you know what they are. And I think Ruth was mentioning them in the chat. We've got, if you are, let's see, the next one coming up is, oh, this is going to be a good one. From acquisition to publication. This is going to teach you so much about the editor and author relationship. So definitely check that out. That's next week, the July 12th. And then for all you screenwriters out there, we have Making Your First Short Film on July 20th with Kate Tuxford, who's a filmmaker, amazingly talented writer and filmmaker, and she's also a professor at Chapman University. And for all you people who had social media questions, we have a great one coming up by Rami Mundi on the July 25th, and that one is free. And Rami is the person who I mentioned started off as self-published and is now traditionally published. So all informative stuff, and then we have good stuff coming up in August too. We've got a lot of busy months ahead of us. So thank you guys so much for coming. I'm going to stop recording now, and I hope that you have gotten some courage and you're gonna go try to pitch, because you should, because it's really, really, really fun. And just remember all this, and you're gonna get the slideshow so you can refresh your memories. But have a great night, and good luck.